Howdy. Welcome to the Texas A&M University College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Peer Programs STEM Education Series. Today, Histology Professor Dr. Larry Johnson will present Anatomy and Physiology. Anatomy is the study of the body's structures, while physiology reveals their function. Make special note today of the intricate relationship between structure and function as Dr. Johnson takes us on a tour of the human body systems. Welcome, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. Today we want to talk about anatomy and physiology, as Tori said. A way of outline, we want to look at anatomy, which is the structure of things, and the physiology, which is a function of those structures. Then we'll talk about the four basic types of tissue that we see with microscopic anatomy, a little bit about fields of anatomy, and then various systems of the body that we'll be talking about today. So anatomy is a study of structure of living things, is what it is, where physiology is the study of the function. That could be mechanical, could be physical, could be biochemical function of living things. But we want to remind ourselves is that function follows form. That is, the structure of thing is important for the function to occur. So anatomy, what is anatomy? Anatomy like the parts of a horse that we see there. And you can see there's many parts. There's a lot of parts to learn in anatomy. And there's even a large list of prefixes and suffixes which help to name the individual structures, which is important. Also, to help name components of anatomy are the planes, the section plane of the animals that or people that we're speaking of. And then also directional terms. Dorsal is in the back, ventral is the body, cranial is toward the head, caudal is toward the tail. These words appear in the names of different structures, anatomical structures that we see. Now, when we study anatomy, we use cadavers, could be horses, could be dogs, or simulated computerized cadavers. Also, it's taught in a systematic way. They start out with a skeleton, and then it's followed by muscles and blood vessels and nerves, and then they'll end up with the different organ systems. And so it's a visual orientation type of classroom that you have as you dissect the animals to identify these different structures. So that's anatomy. It's the parts of the horse. But physiology is what the horse can do with those parts. As you can see, you ever seen a flying horse before? This horse is jumping over a fence. One important part of physiology, in fact, is fundamental to physiology and to life itself, is homeostasis. Homeostasis responds to different stimuli. We can have internal or external stimuli that change things, and then the physiological system has to maintain a steady internal environment. And it does that by constantly detecting things, changing things, to be able to come back to a state of equilibrium. If you eat, or if you exercise, or if you're in a hot room, all those things affects what the physiology or the changes have to go in the body to maintain a normal state. The cells have to be a certain temperature, they have to be receive nutrients, get rid of waste, and you have to have a steady state to be able to do that. Examples may be blood pressure regulation, glucose or insulin concentrations in the blood. Could be a hormonal balance that we see. So homeostasis is a stable internal environment and is brought about by a constant detection and modification of the chemicals in the body to make the cells of the body stay normal. And so basically there's three things you need. You need receptors, that is something to detect a change. And then you need some control system, that is a system that could react to that change. And then you need effectors. effectors or cells or organs that are told to do something, that can do something about it to change the state. For example, if you touched a hot plate, the receptors in your hand would detect that, tell your nervous system, the control system, and the nervous system would tell the muscles in your arm to pull your arm back. And so you removed it from the source. So you need something to detect it, something to analyze it, and something to do something about it, the change in the internal or external environment to maintain a steady state for the cells of the body. And that brings us to two mechanisms. One is a negative feedback, and that is when the response to an effector opposes the original stimulus. So you're exposed to a hot condition, and so you start to sweat. And you can see sweat coming here from your finger pad, and you can see the sweat glands there, and that cools the body off. So the body stops making the sweat because it's already cool from the evaporation of the sweat on the surface. That's a negative feedback. There's also a positive feedback. A positive feedback was whenever the effectors add to the initial stimulus. So it's a cascade where one part starts, and then it makes another part start, and then another part start. And you want that under certain conditions. One would be blood clotting. If you're bleeding, you don't want it to stop in the middle. You want it to go ahead and clot all the way for that opening that has occurred, the cut, for example. So a negative feedback responds, and a positive feedback, and that helps the physiological conditions of the body to maintain homeostasis, the steady state of the internal environment. Now, there's different fields of anatomy, and we'll talk about some later on, specific ones, but there's a macroscopic anatomy. That is what you can see with your naked eye, and you can see those body whorls of the horse and the human there. That's macroscopic anatomy. There's also microscopic anatomy, and that's what you need to see with a microscope. And that's what we'll be talking about today. There's cytology, which is just cells, or histology, which is a study of the organization of the body, and the whole body is divided up into 4 types of tissues, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, protoplasm is a living substance. A rock is not a living substance, but protoplasm cells are a living substance, and the smallest unit of protoplasm is a cell. Some animals only have a single cell. And then tissues are groups of cells with the same general function. Tissue equal texture of things. So muscle, nerve, epithelium, and connective tissue, the entire body could be fit into one of those 4 tissues. And then when you get 2 tissues together, you make an organ. Skin, kidney, intestines, blood vessels, all those are organs. And then you have organ systems. Several organs getting together to do a function. Respiratory system, digestive system, endocrine system, reproductive systems. And so if we look at the 4 basic types of tissue, we start with epithelium. That's what we see in our neighbor. It covers our body. We see connective tissue. That's the white of the eye that we see in our neighbor. Connective tissue is largely non-pigmented. And then there's muscle tissue that allows us to move. And then there's nervous tissue. So 4 basic types of tissue of the body. The epithelium, it forms the outer protective surface. It's your epidermis. If you ever had a blister from sun tanning or touched something hot, the epidermis is a part that comes off, and it covers it. Also, the epithelium cells makes all glands. They also cover most cavities. So the cavities of the body, they cover, like the urinary bladder or the peritoneal cavity, and also lymph vessels and blood vessels. All those are lined by epithelium. Endothelium is what we call it, but it is basically an epithelium. So epithelial tissue does various things. Metabolism of the body, absorption in the gut from things you get from outside, the food that we take in. Also elimination of the products. It could be the kidney, or it could be in the respiratory system. All substances, including gases, normally received or given off by the body must pass through epithelium. So they pass through these cells that line these cavities. And secretory cells are a special type of epithelial cells. And on the right side, we see the sweat gland, which produces a sweat on the surface to cool your skin. Now, epithelium covers organs. You can see the kidney there. The casing on the outside is covered by a mesothelium, which is epithelium. Also, it lines the viscera. It lines the different cavities of the body. It lines the different organs of the body. And also, all secretory cells are epithelium. So epithelium is specialized for their function. And you can see there on the right-hand side, some cells are like columnar shaped, and others are multiple ones on top of one another. And some are more cubed, and some are more flattened on the surface. So the cells change by whatever function they need, or actually the function is possible because the cell is different. And we see in the intestine, we see the columnar cells. There are a bunch of columns, and they have microvilli on the surface of high density, which actually makes a brush border. So the luminal surface, the surface where the food is, you have these little projections out there to increase the surface area so you can amplify absorption to occur. Also for secretion, here we see the pancreas. The ones in the far left, the lighter cells are the pancreatic astral cells. One in the middle are the islets to Langerhans, which make insulin. But the other cells with the big red granules, and look at those packages. Yes, in time for Christmas, all those packages are there. So the secretions are in the little red dots that you see ready to be released. So they're specialized cells for secretion to occur. Also for transport. In the eye that we see in the left there, we transport light. It goes through there. Also, the next one is a blood vessel. And the little spaces that we see are smaller blood vessels, could be a capillary. And at the bottom, we see the little vesicles that are transporting through the endothelial cells. So transport is one of the functions of epithelium. Excretion in the kidney, protection against mechanical damage and dehydration is what our epidermis does to us. Sensory, we have taste, we have taste buds, olfactory, the smell, we have pain receptors to feel things, and also epithelium can contract. We have myoepithelium in your eye that allows you to dilate your iris. So basically, function follows form. That is, you need to have cells having varied shape to have the various functions that epithelium have. Epithelium are connected by connective tissue. That's a histologic glue that binds things together. And we can see on the left-hand side that various cells come from one basic cell, giving rise to the fat cells, to the muscle cells, to the bone cells. All that is connective tissue. In the middle, we see some white blobs, looks like chicken wire. That's fat that we have underneath within our skin. The skeleton is also connective tissue. Cartilage is connective tissue. And here we see the stifle of a horse. So if we take a look at that, you can see this is one bone here, there's another bone there, and you can see the little cushions in between, and those cushions prevent one bone from touching another bone. As well, you got cartilage on the surface too, for it to slide and slip. Is what cartilage does. But you can see these ligaments here that connect the different portions, and you can see that this actually locks so that the horse can lock that, be able to stand up. So also connective tissue is the fat. You see a guy on the left that's 130 pounds and one on the right that's 300 pounds. And so you can see the white fat cells are deposited in the skin of these individuals. Also, blood vessels contain connective tissue, but also blood cells are connective tissue themselves. They carry oxygen, and the white blood cells are part of their immune system that we'll speak of a little later on. Platelets cause clotting of blood. So all these things are connective tissue, and connective tissue surrounds muscle that we see. And muscle contractivity is a fundamental property of protoplasm. Remember, protoplasm is living substance. So if you got living substance, you have contractivity. It's just part of it. Certain cells of muscle are especially adapted to convert chemical energy into mechanical work because they have lots of actin and myosin, a high density of it, more so than other cells. And so locomotion of multicellular animals, as we see in, and then also the beating of the hearts or the movement of internal organs, all depends upon muscles of different types. And there's different types of muscle. We got smooth muscle that we see on the right, cardiac muscle in the middle, and skeletal muscle, of course, is what we use to move ourselves with. So muscle tissue, the function is to generate contractile force. It contracts, and when it does, it squeezes things. If it's a heart, it squeezes blood out. If it's a muscle, it lifts up limbs, or could bring limbs down, is what it does. And then they have a high concentration of contractile proteins. So actin and myosin are in high density. And so you have fewer other organelles in there because they take up so much of that space, and that's what makes them so powerful. And those are organized in certain ways. In striated muscle, sarcomeres are the striation of how you line up the actin and myosin that's in there. Also, muscle is moved by a nerve. Nervous system tells the muscles what to do. And so they're specialized for transmission, reception, and integration of the signal is what they do. And we see up in the upper right-hand side some different types of nerves. And they're very long. They have axons, which take the message out to the target tissue. The target tissue may be another nerve cell, may be a muscle cell. And they have dendrites. Dendrites are the ones that receive the message from the cell. And then we see where the nucleus is where the cell body is. And then also axons go out and innervate the tissue. And here you can see the black strands that are nerves that are going to individual muscle cells. So the long strips that you see are muscle cells. The black dots that you see is the interaction between the nerve and the muscle. And so you have chemical or electrical messages that are transmitted to the muscle cell to allow it to contract. Also, as for communication, depending upon specialized properties, the cells are very irritable and they have very long processes, maybe a meter in length for the nervous system. The central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord to talk to the rest of the body. So if we look at these four basic types of tissue, we see epithelium on the surface, as we said. That's your epidermis. Connective tissue, there's a bone there. This is where the rib cage is. Also, the dermis underneath the skin would be connective tissue. We have muscle, and we see the heart. There's a heart, and we see nerve is a spinal cord. And we can see that on this specimen here again. We can see that there's muscle here. This happened to be the lungs. This is the heart. There's also muscle between the ribs, muscle in on either side of the vertebrae. And you see the spinal column there, and there's a spinal cord and bone. So that's connective tissue. And epithelium, of course, lines the heart, lines these blood vessels and airways in the lungs, and it covers the body. So those are the different locations of the basic types of tissues that are in the body. And here we can see those 4 types of tissues as you see them grossly with gross anatomy. You can see the skin in the epithelium, the muscle, where the muscle has walked out of the skeleton, and then you can see the connective tissue is the bones, and then the nervous system, the nerves coming off of the spinal column.
Dr. Johnson, we have a question for you. They'd like to know if it is true that the tissues of the nervous system cannot regenerate.
There is a lot of the tissues can't regenerate, but they have done studies where birds lose their song during the year, and then they have regeneration of some of the nerve cells to be able to regain the song that they have. So it is true in general, but not in every case. Epithelium can regenerate very nicely. If you cut yourself, it just heals back up. Connective tissue a little slower for it to heal. Muscle doesn't regenerate that well either. If it's skeletal muscle, it can, but not too much. Mostly muscle changes with size, and it changes with size of individual cells, which expands the muscle. Not so much the number of cells change. Now, smooth muscle can change very rapidly because it actually comes from connective tissue. Is where the smooth muscle comes. So it depends upon the type of muscle, but nerve is the one that does it the least. Okay, so if we see some different areas of anatomy, applied anatomy may be surgery, maybe radiology anatomy, maybe kinesiology, the study of physical exercise of things, or it could have surface anatomy, the body of the surface that appears, different structures. Could be a developmental anatomy. Maybe you're studying the heart, how the heart develops. You can see there in a little box there how the blood goes straight, and then it starts to turn, and then it changes as the different anatomy parts appear, then the function follows it, as we've said before. Also a neuroanatomy. So maybe you were just interested in the nervous system and the connections of a neuroanatomy. If we look at from tissue now to organs, remember organ is whenever you have more than one type of tissue, and that makes an organ. Skin, skin is an organ. We can see the epidermis on the surface. You can see the dermis below. So epidermis is epithelium. Dermis is connective tissue. And then below there, also connective tissue, is a hypodermis, where you have many fat cells, as you can see. So if we look at real skin, the light stuff that looks like chicken wire on the top is a hypodermis. And in the middle, the pink that we see is connective tissue, that's your dermis. And the epithelium is a darker one at the very bottom that we can see. So several tissues make an organ. Now skin, what does it do? It protects you against injury, and you can see that little boy has just received an injury, and the nervous system has told him where that injury was, because he's not looking at the other leg, he's looking at this leg. Also, it protects against desiccation. We live in our own sea because our skin prevents us from dehydrating. We are terrestrial beings. We don't have to live in the ocean anymore because we have our ocean within us. And of course, it's the physiology that maintains that ocean within us, the internal environment, to be a steady state. And so we're able to walk around on land because we carry our sea with us, and that we don't dehydrate. Also, we have maintained temperature, water balance is what skin does. Temperature, pain, pressure is what it detects. Also is a basis of recognition. It doesn't take much effort to see which one of these individuals is the mother and which is the daughter. What happens is with age, the elastic tissue is replaced by connective tissue, a collagen, which doesn't stretch like a rubber band. And so as a consequence, wrinkles appear with age. It's just a normal phenomenon. Don't worry about it. It'll happen to you too. I know you don't think about it now. Fat metabolism is in the dermis. Here we can see the skeletal muscle. There are different types of muscle, as I mentioned to you before. There's smooth muscle. It's a small cell with a nucleus in the middle. Then you've got skeletal muscle, which is a big cell, has multiple nuclei on the periphery. And then the skeletal muscle, which is branched, and so it branched so it can communicate with a different cell. So we're talking about a system now, various organs together to make a system. And the skeleton we see of the cow. Bones, they support and protect the body. Long bone, short bone, fat bones, as well as irregular bones in your spinal column. And so we have joints. We see in the upper right side where two bones get together. We have cartilage in between there to prevent damage. We have ligaments that attach it, and we saw a ligament a while ago. And tendons on the lower right, we see where the tendon attaches a bone to a muscle. And so there's movement. Whenever you contract, movement, where you walk, run, jump. And the muscles are important for maintaining posture. We're sitting upright, joint stability, and heat production is all those is what muscle does. So our body heat is due to the metabolism largely of our muscle. And then there's different movement. If you flexion, you close the angle of the joint, or extension, you open the angle. So here we see a horse jumping. Which one is flexion and which one is extension? All right, you got it. Flexion is the back leg, and the extension is the front leg to land. The horse is landing there. So the function of cartilage and bone. Cartilage is our embryologic origin of bone. You can see our embryo. In the embryo, our skeleton is cartilage, and then it's replaced by bone. Also, the cartilage is slick, and it allows you to slide back and forth without damaging the cartilage. It's a cushion between our bones, and it's a spacer to prevent the bone touching bone, which would be very painful. Bone itself protects our enclosures and also allows us to walk on land. So we can carry our mass muscle around because we have the bone on which the muscle hangs. Also, we have protective enclosures. Our skeleton encloses various cavities, the lungs, also the brain, and also hematopoiesis. So inside the bone cavity, the bone marrow, we have blood cell formation. Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, all form right there inside of the bone itself. Now a little bit about the immune system, because it's very important. You wouldn't be able to floss your teeth if it wasn't for your immune system killing the bacteria that you're freeing when you floss your teeth. Protects against foreign invaders of the body, and here we see a lot of them. Could be worms, could be parasites, it could be protozoa, it could be viruses, could be bacteria. These different things, and they vary in size, but the immune system protects against those. It produces and protects a germ-free environment. For our bone marrow to produce the red blood cells and white blood cells, you need a germ-free environment for that to occur. And here we can see some bugs that are ready to get us. The HIV virus, E. coli. When I say get us, some of them live in harmony with us, but others are our immune system very handily eliminates for us. Now there's 3 key steps in combating infection. One is break the cycle of transmission. One is kill the infective agents. Why do we use disinfectants? And the other one is increased the host resistance. That's why we're immunized. We get shots to immunize, and if you went to a foreign country, you'd have to be immunized against more bugs, pathogens than we have in this country. And so you have different lines of defense. The first line of defense is your skin, or it could be the acid in your stomach, or it could be the mucus in the intestines. So remember, what's in the digestive tract is really on the outside. So the body has to defend against things on the outside that you eat.
So Dr. Johnson, they'd like to know, on that first line of defense, the physical barrier, is it easier for some people's skin to break or be receptive to invasion than others?
There would be disease states that is associated with being more porous and allowing more ones to go in. Also, there are cells in the skin that help to detect things coming in. If there's something wrong with those cells, then likewise you would have less ability to be able to detect and respond to those. I wouldn't necessarily think that that there would be a difference if the skin is normal from one individual to another one, or maybe one animal to another one. Maybe there's differences. I'm not sure about that. I would say likely not, if there's no disease state associated with it. And so you want to break the transmission, and that's what the physical barrier does. It breaks the transmission of things coming in. Also, you want to kill the infective agent. Now, all over the body, we have macrophages. We call them different names. Could be in the liver, could be in your skin, it could be in your respiratory system, could be in your blood. These cells actively, a macrophage, they actively eat up and kill the invading substances. And here you can see a macrophage reaching out to get a bacterium that's there. Also, you can see the pores of the sweat gland. You can see bacteria located inside there. And a little bit about immunity. There's three characteristics. One is it's acquired. You don't have it until you're exposed to things. So you have to expose the immune system to it before you get it. Also, it's specific. You expose your immune system to one thing, one bacterium, it responds to that one, but it doesn't respond to a different one. And so it's specific to what it responds to. And so that's why when you go to a different country, you get sick. When they go to here, to the United States, they might get sick because they're not exposed to the same ones, and so have not acquired immunity to that specific one. Also, it has memory. It remembers the previous exposure. And that's the whole essence of immunization. Because if you immunize someone, give them a shot for polio or whatever, and it doesn't remember it, it will be no value. So those things: one, it requires exposure, is specific to what it's exposed to, and it remembers what it was exposed to, but it doesn't respond to what it doesn't expose to. And so, three characteristics of the immunity, and you want to increase the immunity. Now, there are different immune organs. Here we see a lymph node, and the lymph node drains the tissues, and it gets the bacterial or the infective agents in the vicinity of the cells that can respond to it, is what lymph nodes do. There's also tonsils, and you might say, why do we have tonsils? Well, the tonsils, when you eat things, the greatest exposure you have to the environment is what you eat. And so the tonsils are right up there to tell the immune system what is coming their way, what exposes the immune system to something that maybe it needs to respond to, make antibodies against, or whatever, as the food stuff is going down the digestive tract. So it's very important to detect it early so it can respond to it. There's also the thymus, which makes the T lymphocytes, spleen, which cleans the blood and cleans out the old red blood cells as well as bacteria. And here we see the foreign invaders. This is a domestic pen, like a straight pen, and you can see the bacteria that are located on there, and you see the bacteria in a sweat gland. So you wash your hands and you smell your hands, you still smell something sometimes because it was not washed out. It was still in the, so a surgeon not only wash your hands, they also have to use gloves so they can cover up the pores that are containing the bacteria that remain after washing. So the digestive tract is another system. It moves food, it secretes things, and it absorbs things is what it does. So you have the intake of food, you have digestion of food, absorption of food, and the elimination of the waste products. And you can see the different parts. You've got the oral cavity, the esophagus, the stomach, the intestines, and the large intestine that we see there. If you were a horse, you have one stomach like we do, but if you were a cow, you have different chambers in your stomach. You have a rumen, the reticulum, omasum, and adomasum. All those are different chambers of the stomach for the cow. But the horse has one stomach, but it also has a cecum that has digestive components, and this located after the small intestine in that horse. We can see the cecum located right up there. And so remember our anatomy now, the dorsal and ventral. So these are ventral body cavities. In other words, cavities toward the belly, the bottom part of the horse that you see up there. And so we can see that some of the different parts of the digestive tract. There's the stomach. We can see the small intestines, the large intestines. We can see the liver coming through there. And then for another cavity there is the urinary bladder. We can see the urinary bladder as well. The respiratory system is another one of those systems. It's got to get oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. In order to do that, you have to have air in the vicinity of blood. And so we can see what happens is air comes in and the oxygen moves out of the air into the blood. The carbon dioxide moves out of the blood into the air for you to exchange. The cardiovascular system, you have different pressures there that the heart contracts to cause that pressure. Then you have different blood vessels that you can see, and they respond to different mechanical and metabolic needs. And so some of the blood vessels are thick, as you see up there, and some are very thin for the metabolic exchanges to occur. The thick ones are to resist the pressure that's caused by the heart. So again, we have function, fallen form. Here we see a heart pumping, and the way the blood comes in, it comes into the right atrium, right ventricle, to the lungs, from the lungs to the left atrium, left ventricle, through the aorta. And here we see the aorta with valves in it, and it expands. So when a heart contracts on the left, it expands, and then it recoils, and it does because all this very red elastic tissue that we see, kind of red stuff inside the blood vessel that we can see. So the blood vessels are modified for the metabolic need and the function. And here we can see veins. Most of your blood is in veins. That's why you don't bleed to death whenever you cut yourself. And also it's why you can get blood, because most of your blood is in the veins itself. There's the endocrine system. We don't have time to talk about that too much. But also there's special senses. We got the sight. We got hearing is what we have, and also balance is what our ear does. Taste. We have nasal cavity for smelling things, right? And then also touch. Here's a kitty cat licking someone's hand. These are my horses and dog, as we can see. So in conclusion, anatomy is identifying structures by name. And there's suffixes and prefixes. There's different positions that help in those naming. Physiology is a function. An important part of that is homeostasis, the steady state, regardless of the external and internal environment, to steady state environment on the inside. 4 basic types of tissues, and we have different fields of anatomy: gross anatomy, microscopic, development, neurological, and then you have different body systems: digestive system, cardiac system, the different ones. So that's the end of the anatomy and physiology, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you want to. If you actually want to see some histology images, and you can see them in your school, if you go to this YouTube channel, VIBS Histology, and look at the PowerPoint slides on there, they have hyperlinks to these images. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that we might have at this time. Thank you for listening.
All right, we have a question going back to the immune system. They'd like to know if cowpox was used to vaccinate against smallpox. How is that a case of immunity being specific?
Okay, that's a good point. In that cowpox is very similar to smallpox, but it's not the very same thing. So in this case, they tricked the immune system a little bit. The immune system responded to the parts of the cowpox that are similar to the smallpox. There are some differences, but it responds to the similarities of them. They didn't use bacteria to go against smallpox. They used a virus that is very similar to it. So the immune system can be tricked. In fact, that's what we do whenever you immunize an individual, is that you maybe use a dead form of the virus, not live, or a dead form of the bacterium, if you wanted to make a vaccine against something. Or you may have just slightly altered it. Because the immune system, if you have a long structure, the immune system would again be specific to certain parts of that. And so if you have something that's very similar, many of those parts will be the same as that. For example, you can make antibodies against hormones, and the hormone can be different, and the same antibody can detect it if it's the same part of that hormone that the antibody was made on. So it's not made against the whole thing, it's made on different aspects of it that could be similar between the cowpox and the smallpox.
All right. They'd also like to know about these specimens you've been showing them today. What are they? Where they come from? Are they real?
Okay. Yes, these specimens are real. This is from a dog, and these are placinated specimens, and these dogs have been around for a long, long time. And we taught a lot of veterinary students what's inside of a dog with these specimens that we have. And so these are, it's a real dog that was humanely put to sleep, and then it was frozen and then sawed, as you see here, and then it was put into a liquid that removes the fat and the water and replaced with liquid plastic. So it's so-called plastinated now. And so you can use this dog over and over again, and you don't have to sacrifice a lot of dogs, because this dog has been seen by many, many students here at Texas A&M. And I've probably shown this dog in person to probably 35,000 students out there in their classroom. Now, this is from a horse. These are a couple of different bones. This is the kind of knee of the back bone of the horse. And you can see this, again, plastinated specimens. You can see the ligaments here that attach to different parts of the bone. You know, in your knee, you would have different ligaments that hold it together. You know, some of our football players break these ligaments sometimes. And then this dog, this is the one we call Shorty. And this is the one that we looked at, the digestive tract. Of course, you got the oral cavity there. You got the esophagus coming down through here, going to the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestine, the liver, that we see. There's a heart, a little bit of lung, spleen, which is one of the immune organs, and then there's the prostate for us male. We can see the backbone that we can see. So these, again, were dogs that were plastinated, so we can reuse these over and over again. So the veterinarian doesn't have to cut your dog in half whenever you take him in, because they've already seen what's inside the dog that we can use over and over again.
All right. Well, that wraps up our presentation for today. We thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about STEM or veterinary science, we encourage you to visit our website at peer.tamu.edu, and we look forward to seeing you next week as we learn about ethics in science. Have a great day.